So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation on Senator Cory Gardner's reelection and the 2020 ballot issues here in Colorado. And I am so thrilled to be joined today by two amazing conservative women leaders here in Colorado, Kristi Burton Brown, the Vice Chair of the Colorado Republican Party, and Rose Pegliese, Mesa County Commissioner. So glad you guys are here with me today.
Thanks for having us, Tamra.
So fun. Looking forward to our conversation. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys and what you have to say about all of this. So, I saw one poll that showed that only 88% of Republicans in Colorado plan to vote for Senator Gardner to be reelected to the U.S. Senate. And we just have to get those other 12% on board. We have to change that. So, Kristi and Rose, I thought it would be great just to hear from you guys first. How would you and why would you encourage Republicans and Republican-leaning independents to vote for Senator Gardner?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And thankfully, and I work for the state party, like you said, and we're very close associated with the Gardner campaign. And for weeks, we've been out knocking doors, talking to voters. And what's been amazing is that voters want to have these conversations. Obviously, a lot more people are home right now. And while respecting all the social distancing requirements, we are having those conversations with them, and they're talking to us and opening their doors. And one of the things that's really, really getting across to them about Senator Gardner is the Great Outdoors Act that he spearheaded in DC, because whether you're Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated here in Colorado, people really care about our environment and conservation and clean water, clean air for our kids. And so it's the most historic piece of environmental legislation passed in decades. And a lot of voters are really engaging with that. And when they hear that's what Senator Gardner has accomplished, especially contrasted with all the people who go to DC and do nothing, and that's only one of a long list of accomplishments. Those are the kind of things that are really resonating with voters across Colorado, voters of all types. And let's see what Rose thinks, but I think there's a lot to cover with Senator Gardner for sure.
Absolutely. So when I go around talking to people like Kristi has, for us, especially in rural Colorado, and that is all parts of rural Colorado, we talk a lot about Cory Gardner's accomplishments with rural economic development. He has done a lot for our state as a whole, because what he understands is that it does not take just one area of the state to make our state great and to have economic stability and viability, but it takes all of us. And so he has really focused and passed some legislation that has helped with federal lands. Mesa County, where I'm a commissioner, is 72% federal lands, which means that basically the federal government controls our economy and what we can and cannot do to utilize those public lands. And Cory Gardner understands that. It's why he brought the Bureau of Land Management out of Washington, D.C. and into Grand Junction, where the people who are making the decisions that affect our economies are actually now living in our communities, so that they can see the effects of the decisions that they're making and the impacts they have on the people within our communities. So I think that that's been amazing. And I will tell you, as a county commissioner, I have dealt with Cory Gardner's opponent, and he is not as supportive of county issues on federal lands and has basically left us hanging when it came to disputes between the federal government and county commissioners. And I will tell you, our people really want to see a leader, someone who's ready to stand up and fight for rural Colorado, and Cory Gardner has been that leader.
Well, and actually, Rose, you made a really good point that reminded me of something that people are also appreciating about Senator Gardner. And that is when you contrast what he has accomplished to what Hickenlooper did as governor, and a key issue in Pueblo is the clean water down there. It's something that was promised to them when President Kennedy was in office. And even as governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper could not work with our federal representatives and senators and congressmen at the time, or the administration, even when Obama was in office, to get that done. Hickenlooper could not perform and could not deliver for a huge area of Colorado on a really important issue, but Senator Gardner did. And that's really resonating with voters in Pueblo and some areas that feel like they're often forgotten by the Denver, Boulder types like John Hickenlooper. They see that Senator Gardner has really been able to work for them and deliver for Colorado, and that Colorado-centric message And someone with a record of accomplishment, I think, is making a difference as we get out there and campaign for him.
Well, and what I love about, what I love about Cory is that he actually keeps his promises. When he says he's going to go out to rural Colorado and he's going to help with our issues, he actually does. And his opponent looked me in the eye at a meeting one day and said, I will stand with you and I will stand up for Mesa County in Western Colorado. And then nobody returned my phone calls. And so that is the reality of promises made, promises kept of Cory Gardner and not of his opponent.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. Excellent points. And, you know, I'll just piggyback on that and you guys can jump back in too in a few minutes if you'd like. But you were mentioning the Great American Outdoors Act. What an achievement. And it's an example of the fact that Senator Cory Gardner is one of the top 3 most bipartisan senators in the US Senate. And that is something that is particularly difficult to achieve with the division that we have right now in this country and how extreme, frankly, the left has gotten. And so, you know, even the vote for the Great American Outdoors Act, he won that, you know, was able to persuade, and that was a vote of 310 to 107. So I would say that's a really big accomplishment right there in just how his, you know, his manner and his ability to work across the aisle while also thinking about Colorado and upholding principles that are very important for us as Republicans.
Well, that's a great point, Tamra,
Yeah.
because I do think some of the conservatives around our state, and I'm a conservative Republican, they want to know that Senator Gardner is also in DC voting for the issues that we deeply care about as conservative Republicans. And if you look at his record, he absolutely does. Everything we care about, Second Amendment rights, pro-life issues, religious freedom, he's there voting on those issues too, and he's always on the right side. But the thing is, he doesn't limit his work to that. And that's what I think draws the unaffiliated and swing and even moderate Democrats to Cory, is because contrast his record with what Senator Bennett has done, practically nothing up in DC, whereas Cory delivers over and over for Colorado. And I think our independent-minded voters in this state, that's really what they're looking for, is someone with a bipartisan record of achievement that makes a difference in our towns and our communities, whether you live in Metro Denver, Pueblo, or the Western Slope, or the Eastern Plains, where Cory's from. Delivering things for Colorado deeply matters to our state.
Absolutely. He's achieved so much in that area. Just even let's look at COVID and the response that he led here in Colorado, delivering more than $12 billion in relief for small businesses and their employees. Of course, he voted for that, and securing hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 test kits and face masks for Colorado. So just, you know, again, the need of the moment, jumping in and advocating for Coloradans. You know, some of his past accomplishments secured the funding for the VA hospital. You mentioned he brought the Bureau of Land Management here. And, you know, his work on trying to fight against Obamacare and yet keeping the pre-existing condition piece, guaranteeing protection for people. That's a little bit controversial, but, you know, he's in there, he's in the fight, he's in the debate. He wants to see the changes made to Obamacare that would open up competition for healthcare, which we all know is the real key to lowering prices, you know, or one of the keys to lowering prices, as well as expanding the scope of care by different providers. So he's in that fight, and I'm trusting that in, you know, our president's going to be reelected, and we'll be able to, you know, Congress will be able to revisit that issue in the next session. So also, you know, we're talking about John Hickenlooper. Well, he wants to, you know, get rid of fossil fuel development in Colorado, kind of the ilk of our governor, who just wants to do away with all fossil fuel, you know, powered vehicles. And it's, you know, there's 230,000 oil and gas workers across Colorado. This represents $31 billion in our state. It's a powerful economic driver. We all know that with all of the technologies in energy development, we are looking at clean energy. We aren't looking at, you know, pollution that we've had in the past. So it just makes no sense that we would kill that industry in our state. It's such an important industry.
No, I agree. And, one of the very important projects that Cory Gardner had worked on for years with us and has gotten it through is the Jordan Cove liquefied natural gas export facility in Coos Bay, Oregon, which just got approved. And that basically is going to take Northwest Colorado natural gas and ship it to Coos Bay, Oregon, where it will then end up in Asia. And what's really important for Cory and for us, along with the jobs, is something that Kristi had mentioned as well, is, as a mom raising my 2 kids in this community, I want clean air and clean water. I believe I'm an environmentalist as well, and being able to get natural gas over to China and some of those other countries that are burning dirty fuels into the environment, that affects our global environment. And Cory Gardner understands that, and he cares about the environment and is focused on a project that has both economic development opportunities and benefits, but also an environmental component that will help clean up our global environment for decades and generations. And that's really important to Colorado voters.
I absolutely agree. That's really key. And Cory has both the optimism and the foresight, I think, to see what we can do with a clean future in Colorado and how we can bring that to the world, and not only keep it with us. And you make a good point too, Rose, about it being really family centric, a lot of these issues. I also have a couple kids, and I think looking at the oil and gas dollars also, a lot of people aren't aware of how much oil and gas dollars go to education in Colorado. And when we lose our energy industries, like Polis and Hickenlooper often fight for, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris promised to ban fracking, and things like that the far left of the Democrat Party is proposing. In Colorado, it's very personal to moms and people with kids, because it would take away their education funding. We really rely on that, and I think it's important that we know Cory would fight to keep those education dollars and those economic dollars here in Colorado.
And, one more thing on energy. I think all of us would love to be in favor of an all of the above energy strategy, but there are some realities that we're living with right now, and that is there's not a deliverability and efficiency and a cost effectiveness to the alternative energy that we have right now, whether it's wind or solar. Just take those two. It just does not compare to, powering our homes and our vehicles in a cost effective manner. And so, we're already seeing what's happening in California with rolling blackouts and all of this. So until we have that nailed, it makes no sense to have a plan to transition. So kind of as a side note, and just a few more, contrasts with Hickenlooper and Cory Gardner. Hickenlooper boasted about transferring over 8,000 names to ICE. Believing that the vast majority of young Latinos don't care about a pathway to citizenship, whereas Cory Gardner has worked with a bipartisan group of senators to protect dreamers and secure the border. So again, he's got that ability to kind of thread the needle, if you will, on some of these issues and be reasonable. I know I've been going door to door. There's so many groups, the GOP, et cetera, but I've been going door to door with Faith and Freedom and passing out a flyer that contrasts Hickenlooper and Gardner on, abortion on demand. Yes for Hickenlooper, no for Cory. A border wall, of course, yes for Cory, no for Hickenlooper. Trump impeachment, yes for Hickenlooper, no for Cory. We know that the whole impeachment process was a hoax, and a lot more information is coming out right now proving that. Trump tax cuts, those have been huge for Colorado and for Americans in general. And, Hickenlooper's a no on that. And of course, Cory's a yes, and we could go on. So I think the choice is clear, and I would just encourage our fellow Republicans and right-leaning independents to not get hung up on perfection. I think that's one of the hardest things, especially on the far right in Colorado, is for people to focus on a few things that they don't think he's doing or that they want Cory to do for them, rather than focus on the fact that he's doing so much for Coloradans. And, no one's perfect. All you have to do is be married for quite a long time to figure that out, right? So this ideal perfectionism that we expect from our elected leaders is a little unrealistic.
It is. Well, and I think, Tamra, too, you're so smart in telling people that they should, look beyond what they're seeing, because a lot of what people think is true about Cory's record is also shaped through the frame of a media that's very biased against Republicans in office right now. I mean, I look at the Denver Post every morning, and it's highlighted very well. And so even as I've traveled the state and I talk to some people, what they think Cory has done, some things that they think they're not happy about, or they think he hasn't stood with conservatives, when we actually talk about his actual record, they find that their assumptions were wrong because it was how the media presented the story, and it wasn't an accurate representation of what Cory's even done up in DC. So I think that's relevant to keep in mind too, that we should do our own research, and Cory's absolutely with us on all the issues that matter. And I say that as a very conservative Republican.
Yes, absolutely. And, and that's where it's like, go to the source. I know sometimes people don't like that politicians tweet so much, but go to his Twitter feed and go to his Facebook page, because that's where you're going to get that true record of results.
And do you mind if I throw out one last thing about Cory and healthcare?
Yes.
I just think an issue that we constantly hear about from some of the swing voters is healthcare. It's a very personal issue for all of us. Again, moms with families, we really care about it. And it's constantly said, this came up in the debate, that Cory and the Republicans as a whole want to take insurance away from people with pre-existing conditions. And I think it's a ridiculous argument at this point. And people need to know that Cory has put forward a bill that would absolutely protect people with pre-existing conditions. And if anyone listening hasn't heard the commercial with Cory and his mom that his campaign put out, where he talks about his mom fighting cancer and being a cancer survivor, and that's one of the reasons he believes people with pre-existing conditions need to be covered. No matter what happens to Obamacare, we can protect those people, and we must and we will. And that means a lot to me, because my husband is also a cancer survivor. He's been in remission for 3 years now and is doing extremely well. But a message really resonates with me. I want to see my husband protected, as so many moms across Colorado want to see our families protected. And we absolutely know without a doubt that's something Cory has fought for, is still fighting for, and isn't going to let up.
Excellent. I'm so glad you dug into that.
No, I agree 100%, Kristi. And I think people forget, right? Because we look at the candidate, but we forget that he's a family man. He really does care about children and families. And I have a similar experience where one of my children has a very expensive medical need. And Cory Gardner and I have talked about that, and the high cost of pharmaceuticals and the difficulty it is to get her medication. And so he cares and he understands and is working on solutions. And I think if anyone can get a solution through Washington, D.C., it's Cory Gardner.
Absolutely.
He has proven that. And that's the other thing. He's been tested and tried and proven. John Hickenlooper hasn't. We also know that Hickenlooper would just, line up in lockstep with the far left agenda. And it's not good for our country. It's not taking us in the direction that we need to go. So re-elect Senator Cory Gardner. Any last words on the senator?
Well, I was just going to mention, Cory Gardner actually wants this job. He's campaigned for it. He's worked hard for us. And his opponent hasn't really been all that excited to be our U.S. Senator. And that's a big deal. We have a lot of issues at the federal level. There is a lot of interaction with the federal government and economic development for our state. And we really need somebody who wants to be there and is committed to this position. And that person's Cory Gardner.
Excellent. Thanks, you guys. That was just great. And we'll look forward to any comments that our viewers have, or any questions in the comments when we post this. And we'll just be watching for that. And we'll really want to respond to you. Just in closing about Senator Gardner, just some of the kudos from the Gazette. Gardner has shown us that the Senate is a good place for people with vision, persistence, and a nonpartisan spirit of mutual respect to get things done. So, just close that out with that. And he's been certainly given praise by other media outlets in the state as well. So let's dive into Colorado ballot issues. So we've kind of divided these up, and different ones of us will kind of hit different ones. So Kristi, I think you are going to address for us Proposition 115, 117, and 118, if you want to dive into that.
Sure thing. So I'll try and keep it brief, and certainly happy to answer people's questions if they come up when you post this, Tamra. But 115 would be a ban on late-term abortion in Colorado. What's really resonating with voters on this issue, according to the campaign who's running this initiative, is a lot of people are unaware that in Colorado it's legal to have an abortion until the day of birth. We're one of only 7 states in the nation, I believe one of only 5 countries in the world that has states that still allow abortion for any reason. That's called abortion on demand, unlimited. So in Colorado, and there are specifically 2 places in Colorado where you can go and have an abortion for any reason up until 40 weeks. And so this would push that back to a much more what's considered reasonable by people on all sides of the aisle, 22 weeks. That's when a baby can feel pain. It's when a baby can survive outside the womb with care, can suck their thumb, can hear their mother's voice. No one can really deny that at that point, they're a little human being who could survive if given the chance. So that's what this does. It pulls that back to what the majority of states actually currently do, which is limit abortion at viability is what it's called, when a baby can survive outside the womb. It also has an exception for the life of the mother, because we believe in protecting women's lives as well. And there's no criminal penalties for a woman, even if this were to pass, which that's been very important to swing voters in Colorado to hear that this does not criminalize women. This is not about going after women. Women are in very difficult, tragic situations. But when you hit that point where that baby can survive outside the womb, 74% of Americans of all kinds, Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, young, old, agree that it's just too extreme to continue to have abortion with no limits at that point. So a yes vote would put that very reasonable restriction here in Colorado. So that's 115. Yes. 117. Do you guys want to comment on it? Or do you want me to roll through?
No, just totally agree.
Okay. All right, then moving on to 117, that is the fee initiative. And so if you like Tabor, you're gonna like this one. 117 should have a yes vote. It would allow voters in Colorado to have a say when the Democrats who control our legislature kind of try and do an end run around voters. Right now, they're required to vote on tax increases. That's what Tabor does. It protects your right to say yes or no to a tax increase. But what's happened in the last few years is, instead of calling it a tax, they call it a fee, and try to create these enterprises that really cost voters a lot of money. And so what 117 would do is say, if the new fee, which is really a hidden tax, costs a certain amount of money, there's a threshold, then voters get a say on that too. So it's really the same thing. In many ways, it's the same thing as Tabor, but applying it to something that's called a fee instead of a tax. So I think it's a great idea. So a yes on 117. That's a position the state party has taken.
Yes.
And then my last one, 118, is that's a paid medical and family leave. It's an interesting one because a lot of people, including the president himself, do support family leave. Like that's an important issue that a lot of people should get from their employer. The problem with the one here in Colorado with 118 is it would force it on small businesses and cost them so much money that it would force them to go out of business. So the devil's really in the details on 118. And it's not just giving people an option to take care of their families and encouraging businesses to go in that direction. It's forcing them to do something they can't afford. It's an unworkable system that didn't consult small business owners, which a lot of women across the state are small business owners. And it would force them to do something that would actually cause their employees to lose their jobs. And so not only would people be stuck without family medical leave, they'd be stuck without a job. So it's a bad solution for an issue that we could address in much, much better ways. So I'd be a no on 118.
Excellent. Rose?
Well, thanks, Kristi. That was a great overview of some ballot issues. And then I'm going to take a few others. So 113 is one that's near and dear to my heart. Back in the 2019 legislative session, the governor and the legislature, with bipartisan opposition, basically stole Colorado's votes for president, our 9 electoral college votes, and gave them to a compact of states. And we're so fortunate to live in Colorado, where our Constitution allows a citizen's veto. of a law that we think is not in Colorado's best interest. We, with over 2,200 grassroots volunteers, were able to put that on the ballot. So thank you to any of you watching. And so you will see that on the ballot, 113. Now, don't be confused. There are a lot of people on the other side who are trying to confuse conservatives and say, if you want to protect the Electoral College, vote yes on 113. That is not the answer. No is the answer on 113. We do not want to join the Compact of States. We want Colorado's votes for president to stay with Coloradans in Colorado. So please tell your friends and neighbors. The other side is getting a lot of money, millions of dollars from California and places outside of Colorado, but Coloradans are really fired up about this issue. And so the grassroots got us on the ballot, and Cory Gardner. If it wasn't for him, we would have never made the ballot. So we appreciate his work too. Yes. But we really need the grassroots to help us get us over the edge. So vote no on 113. The next one is Proposition 116, which is to reduce the state income tax from 4.63 to 4.55. This one's pretty easy. If you want to pay less in state income tax, vote yes. Obviously, there are people who are going to say, well, the state needs more money, but I think especially at this time where COVID has hit us, families are in a difficult position, and we want to continue to attract businesses to Colorado. Lowering our state income tax is just good fiscal policy, and so please vote yes on 116. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is Amendment EE, and basically, or I'm sorry, it's a Proposition EE, and that is a tobacco tax. Now, a lot of us don't like tobacco, but as conservatives, we don't also like sin taxes. And so this is a tax on tobacco, but the more important, even if you think, hey, maybe a higher tax on tobacco is okay, it's going to hurt our small businesses, again, at a time when COVID has hit them so hard. And it will also go into the black hole known as the general fund. So all of the tax money that's raised goes into the general fund. They say they're going to use it for education. How many times and how many ballot questions do we have to vote on where they say it's going to go to education, but it never actually makes it there? And so, and then eventually it might get to some tobacco education campaigns as well. So, but basically you're trusting the legislature with more money, and you don't know where it's going to really actually go. So we're going to say vote no on EE. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Totally agree. So I'll just address the remaining four very briefly. Proposition 114 adds a wildlife experiment, which is really a reintroduction of gray wolves to the state constitution. I don't think we need that in our state constitution. So you will hear as I comment on two more of these. I'm not a fan of amending the Constitution related to things that should be settled usually at the local level and or state level, and by the legislature or by, local governing bodies. So Amendment B, first of all, it is a tax increase. There's a lot to this one, but I'm just going to boil it down simply for the voter. To not get into too many details. The bottom line, it's a tax increase. And if it passes, your property taxes will go from 5.88% to 7.15%. And again, we certainly don't want to have increased taxes. A lot of these are about taxes, aren't they? So so that's a no vote. That is a no vote on Amendment B. Amendment 76 to reaffirm that only US citizens can vote in Colorado. This is something that's already been established, but it's on the ballot, so go ahead and vote yes on Amendment 76. Amendment 77 wants to regulate local gambling limits in certain areas or cities in the state through, again, a constitutional amendment. Now, this issue is already in the Constitution. And so that's why to change it, it has to be amended. But again, I'm just not a fan. I'm a little bit of an idealist. I think we need to go back to square one and get that out of the Constitution, which is quite a process and it's not that easy, and take that to the local level or the state level if that can be justified for legislation. So I'm just going to have to say that's a no vote. So I think we've kind of wrapped that up. Does anybody else have any comments on the amendments before we wrap up?
Oh, great overview.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I know I've had a lot of fun discussion on my Facebook page already about these, and also on the Colorado Conservative Women group. And if you're not a part of that group, reach out to it. It's a really great group on Facebook to join. So thank you, ladies, so much for being with me today. This has been a great conversation. I so appreciate all that you guys do in the state for Republicans and Republican candidates and issues, and keep on leading well, because you do that so well. And thanks for being with me today.
Thank you, Tamra.
Thank you, Tamra.
Have all your discussions. I appreciate all you're doing to make sure people hear about the issues.
Thank you so much. All right, have a great day.
Thank you, ladies.
Thanks, Rose.